The sun was setting in the west, casting a golden hue over the desolate land. The horizon stretched endlessly, interrupted only by the occasional cactus or tumbleweed rolling across the dusty trail. It had been a long day for John Carter, a lone traveler who had ventured far from his usual path. His horse, an old but sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, plodded along with weary steps, its hoofs kicking up clouds of fine dust that clung to their tired forms. John was not one for idle thoughts, but as the shadows grew longer and the air began to cool, he couldn't help but reflect on how strange this journey had become. He had left the small town of Willow Creek early that morning, intending to reach the neighboring settlement of Blackwater by nightfall. But somewhere along the way, the trail seemed to twist and turn unpredictably, leading him deeper into unfamiliar territory. It was then, just as the last rays of sunlight were fading into twilight, that John spotted something unusual, a figure lying motionless at the edge of the trail. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than another victim of the harsh desert conditions, perhaps a traveler who had succumbed to dehydration or heat stroke. Yet something about the scene made John uneasy. The body lay too still, almost unnaturally so, and there was no sign of any belongings nearby. He dismounted slowly, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his revolver. "Hello!" he called out cautiously, his voice carrying to the quiet evening air. There was no response, only the faint rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Approaching carefully, John knelt beside the figure and turned it over. To his relief, it was a young woman, her face pale but unmarked. She looked no older than 16, her dark hair tangled and matted with dirt, her clothes torn and stained with mud. "She's alive," John muttered under his breath, feeling for a pulse. It was weak but steady. He sighed, both relieved and perplexed. What was a girl like her doing out here alone? And why did she seem so abandoned? With little hesitation, John decided to take her with him. He hoisted her onto Rusty's saddle and climbed up behind her, wrapping his arms around her slender frame to keep her steady. As they rode off into the gathering darkness, John felt a sense of duty settle over him. This girl needed protection, and he would see to it that she received it. The night was cold, the stars above twinkling brightly against the vast black sky. John led Rusty toward a cluster of rocks where he hoped to find some shelter from the wind. Once settled, he lit a small fire using flint and steel, the flames casting flickering shadows across the rocky walls. The girl remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but regular. John sat close to the fire, keeping watch while occasionally glancing at her peaceful form. "Who are you?" he whispered softly, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "And what brought you out here?" As the hours passed, John began to notice something peculiar. Every now and then, when the firelight danced across the ground, he swore he saw movement near the girl, movement that shouldn't have been there. Shadows shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet unmistakably wrong. They moved independently of the fire's glow, twisting and writhing as if alive. Shaking his head, John dismissed it as fatigue playing tricks on his mind. Still, the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. By the time dawn broke, painting the landscape in soft hues of orange and pink, the girl finally stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing large, luminous orbs filled with confusion. "Where am I?" she asked weakly, her voice barely audible. "You're safe now," John replied gently, handing her a canteen of water. "You were found unconscious on the trail." The girl drank greedily, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," she murmured after a moment. "I don't remember much, just riding, and then—" Her voice trailed off, her expression clouding with fear. "What's your name?" John asked, trying to sound reassuring. "Marie," she whispered. "My name is Marie." For the rest of the day, John and Marie traveled together, heading toward Blackwater. Along the way, Marie recounted fragments of her story, how she had been traveling with her family until bandits attacked, leaving her alone and lost in the wilderness. Though her tale was tragic, John couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Little did he know, the truth was far darker than anything he could imagine. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of Blackwater, a dusty town surrounded by barren hills and dotted with wooden buildings. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, mingling with the scent of leather and wood smoke that hung heavy in the air. People bustled about, going about their daily routines, seemingly oblivious to the newcomers. John helped Marie down from Rusty and guided her toward the local saloon, hoping to find someone who might recognize her or offer assistance. Inside, the air was thick with the sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and boisterous conversation. John scanned the room, his gaze falling upon a grizzled old man sitting alone in the corner. "That's Sheriff Thompson," whispered Marie, pointing discreetly. "Maybe he can help us." Approaching cautiously, John introduced himself and explained their situation. Sheriff Thompson listened intently, his weathered face betraying nothing. When Marie finished speaking, the sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "I've heard tell of bandit activity in these parts," he said gravely, "but I'll need more details before I could do anything." As the discussion continued, John noticed something odd. Whenever Marie spoke, her shadow moved differently, not in sync with her movements, but rather as if it had a life of its own. At first, he thought it must be a trick of the lighting, but as the moment stretched on, the anomaly became undeniable. "Sheriff," John interjected suddenly, "can you tell me if anyone in town has reported missing persons recently?" Thompson frowned, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "There have been a few cases," he admitted reluctantly. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," John replied, though his mind raced with possibilities. Could Marie truly be who she claimed to be? Or was there something else at play here? That night, unable to sleep, John crept outside the inn where they were staying. The moon hung low in the sky, bathing the world in silvery light. Leaning against the wall, he stared out at the empty street, his thoughts consumed by the strange occurrences of the past few days. It was then that he saw it, the shadow again, moving independently of its source. This time, however, it wasn't Marie's shadow. It belonged to no one he could see. Panic surged within him as he realized the implications. Whatever or whoever was following them was invisible, hidden from sight, but very much present. Summoning all his courage, John confronted Marie the next morning. "Tell me the truth," he demanded firmly. "Who or what are you really?" Marie hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "You won't believe me," she whispered. "Try me." Taking a deep breath, Marie revealed her secret. She wasn't human, not entirely. Centuries ago, she had been cursed, bound to wander the earth as a guardian spirit, protecting those in need while remaining trapped between worlds. Her shadow, which had always betrayed her true nature, was a remnant of her former self, a constant reminder of the life she had lost. John listened in stunned silence, struggling to process the unbelievable revelation. "So you weren't kidnapped by bandits," he stated finally. "No," Marie confirmed sadly. "I was drawn here by a disturbance, an evil force lurking in the shadows. I came to stop it, but instead I became part of it." Determined to uncover the mystery, John and Marie set out once more, venturing beyond the safety of Blackwater. Their search led them to an ancient cave hidden deep within the mountains, a place steeped in legend and foreboding. Within its depths, they discovered the source of the malevolent energy, a demon masquerading as a lost soul, preying upon unsuspecting travelers. In a climactic battle, John and Marie joined forces, combining their strengths to defeat the creature. With the demon vanquished, Marie's curse was lifted, allowing her to finally move on. As she faded into the light, her final words echoed in John's heart. "Thank you for believing in me." And so, the trail was silent once more, its secrets buried beneath the sands of time. But for John Carter, the experience had changed him forever, teaching him that even in the darkest corners of the Wild West, hope and redemption could still be found. The aftermath of the battle left John Carter standing amidst the remnants of what had once been a quiet, unassuming cave. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur and earth, a stark contrast to the crisp mountain breeze that occasionally swept through the narrow entrance. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear but from the adrenaline rush of having faced something so unimaginable and survived. As he caught his breath, John's gaze drifted toward the spot where Marie had stood moments before. Her form had shimmered, like heat rising off the desert sands, until she vanished completely, leaving behind only the faintest whisper of her voice. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling her words, "Thank you for believing in me." They echoed in his mind, resonating with a depth he couldn't fully comprehend. But there was no time to dwell on emotions just yet. The task at hand required focus. John lit a lantern hanging from his belt, its soft glow illuminating the jagged walls around him. The cave stretched farther than he'd initially thought, its passages twisting and turning into darkness. Somewhere deep within, he could hear the distant drip of water, each drop reverberating like a heartbeat in the oppressive silence. Rusty waited outside, tethered to a rocky outcrop. John hesitated for a moment, debating whether to venture deeper alone or return to Blackwater and gather reinforcements. But something compelled him forward, a gut instinct honed by years of surviving in the unforgiving Wild West. Whatever secrets this place held, they needed to be uncovered, if only to ensure that nothing else emerged to prey upon the innocent. Step by careful step, John moved further into the cavern. The ground beneath his boots was uneven, littered with sharp stones and patches of damp soil. His lantern cast long, flickering shadows on the walls, their movements almost lifelike in the dim light. Every creak of leather, every rustle of fabric seemed amplified in confined space, heightening his senses to an almost unbearable degree. It wasn't long before he stumbled upon the first sign of something unnatural. Etched into one of the walls were symbols, ancient runes that glowed faintly under the lantern's light. John ran a finger along the grooves, tracing the intricate patterns. Little did he know, these markings told the story of the demon they had defeated, detailing its origins and how it had come to inhabit the mortal realm. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the full scope of what they had faced. This wasn't just some random evil force. It was part of a larger cycle, a pattern stretching back centuries. And if history repeated itself, as it often did in the untamed lands of the Wild West, then others might soon find themselves ensnared in similar traps unless precautions were taken. Shaking off the weight of such thoughts, John pressed onward. The passage began to narrow, forcing him to duck low to avoid scraping his head against the ceiling. The air grew colder, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that made his stomach churn. Ahead, the sound of dripping water grew louder, accompanied now by another noise, a low, rhythmic thumping, like the beating of a drum. His hand instinctively moved to the revolver holstered at his side. Though the immediate threat appeared gone, caution dictated preparedness. As he rounded a bend in the tunnel, the source of the noise revealed itself. A massive chamber, its floor covered in crystalline formations that refracted the lantern's light into dazzling hues. In the center of the room stood an altar, carved from black stone and adorned with strange artifacts, bones, feathers, and shards of obsidian. John approached cautiously, his boots crunching softly against the crystal-laden ground. Upon closer inspection, he noticed carvings etched into the surface of the altar, more of those cryptic runes, though these seemed newer, less weathered than the ones he'd seen earlier. Among them was a single word, written in a language he didn't recognize, but which sent a shiver down his spine nonetheless. Before he could decipher more, movement caught his eye. From the shadows at the edge of the chamber, figures emerged, not human, but humanoid, their forms hunched and grotesque. Their skin was mottled gray, their eyes glowing red like embers in a dying fire. They moved silently, their presence heavy with malice. John raised his revolver, aiming for the nearest creature. "Stay back," he warned, his voice echoing off the walls. But the creatures showed no signs of retreating. Instead, they advanced, their clawed hands reaching out hungrily. In the ensuing chaos, John fired shot after shot, each bullet striking true, but doing little to deter the advancing horde. These beings were unlike anything he'd ever encountered, their bodies seemingly impervious to conventional weapons. Desperation fueled his actions as he scrambled for cover, using the altar as both a shield and a vantage point. One of the creatures leapt at him, its jaws snapping mere inches from his face. With a grunt of effort, John shoved aside, sending it crashing into the crystals below. The impact caused several of them to shatter, releasing bursts of blinding light that momentarily disoriented the attackers. Seizing the opportunity, John grabbed a shard of obsidian from the altar and brandished it like a dagger. The fight became brutal, a testament to survival rather than skill. John parried blows with the makeshift weapon, cutting deep gashes into the creature's flesh despite their apparent resilience. Blood, thick and black, spilled onto the ground, mingling with the shard of crystal and creating a macabre mosaic. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, the last of the creatures fell, its body dissolving into ash as it hit the ground. Exhausted and injured, John slumped against the altar, his breathing ragged. Around him, the chamber lay silent once more, save for the steady drip of water echoing through the space. For a long while, he simply sat there, processing the events that had transpired. The realization dawned on him slowly but surely. This wasn't over. Not really. There would always be forces beyond comprehension, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. And it was people like him, people willing to face the unknown, who stood between those forces and the rest of the world. Summoning the last of his strength, John gathered the artifact from the altar, tucking them safely into his saddlebags. If anyone could make sense of them, it would be Sheriff Thompson back in Blackwater. Perhaps together, they could uncover the truth behind the runes and prevent another catastrophe. As he exited the cave, the morning sun greeted him warmly, casting golden rays across the rugged landscape. Rusty whinnied softly, sensing his master's approach. Mounting the horse, John glanced back one final time at the mouth of the cave, its dark interior swallowed by shadow. Little did he know, the answers he sought lay buried not in the past, but in the future, a future fraught with danger, mystery, and the relentless pursuit of justice in a land where lawlessness reigned supreme. For now, however, all that mattered was putting one foot in front of the other, riding toward whatever destiny awaited him next. The ride back to Blackwater was a solemn one. John Carter sat tall in the saddle, his grip on the reins steady despite the weariness that clung to him like a second skin. The artifacts from the cave rested securely in his saddlebags, their weight a constant reminder of the strange and unsettling journey he had just endured. Rusty plodded along at an easy pace, his hooves kicking up clouds of dust that swirled in the morning breeze. As they neared the town, John's thoughts turned inward. He replayed the events of the past few days over and over in his mind, searching for some semblance of clarity. Marie's revelation still haunted him. The idea that she wasn't entirely human, that her shadow had been a clue all along, hidden in plain sight. And then there was the demon, its presence so malevolent it had left an indelible mark on his soul. How could such things exist in a world where science and reason were supposed to reign supreme? Blackwater appeared ahead, its wooden buildings standing stark against the backdrop of rolling hills. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, and the faint sound of conversation drifted through the air. Life here seemed untouched by the supernatural horrors John had faced, and for a moment he envied the townsfolk their ignorance. But he knew better than to wish for blindness. Sometimes seeing the truth, even when it terrified you, was the only way forward. Sheriff Thompson's office was tucked away in a corner of the saloon, a small, unassuming room cluttered with papers, wanted posters, and the occasional rusted revolver. John dismounted Rusty and tied him to a post outside before pushing open the door. The sheriff looked up from behind his desk, his sharp eyes narrowing as he took in John's disheveled appearance. "Back so soon?" Thompson asked gruffly, setting down his pen. "Find what you were looking for?" John hesitated, unsure where to begin. Finally, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out one of the artifacts, a fragment of obsidian etched with glowing runes. He placed it gently on the desk, watching as the sheriff leaned closer to examine it. "What is this?" Thompson murmured, his voice tinged with both curiosity and caution. "I don't know," John admitted, "but I think it holds the answers we need." For the next hour, the two men pored over the artifact, comparing its markings to those in old books and maps stored in the sheriff's collection. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, one of ancient rituals, forbidden knowledge, and a power that had long lain dormant beneath the surface of the Wild West. It became clear that the demon John had fought was merely a symptom of something far greater, a dark force that had been stirring for centuries. "We have to warn the others," Thompson said finally, slamming his fist onto the desk. "If this thing managed to break free once, it could happen again, and next time, it might not be alone." John nodded grimly. "Where do we start?" The days that followed were a blur of activity. John and Sheriff Thompson traveled throughout the region, sharing their findings with other lawmen and settlers who dared to listen. Some dismissed their warnings outright, refusing to believe in anything beyond the tangible realities of bullets and bandits. Others, however, listened intently, their faces pale with understanding as the implications sank in. One such listener was Clara Hayes, a young woman whose family had disappeared under mysterious circumstances months earlier. Her story mirrored many of the details John had uncovered during his investigation, and she proved invaluable in piecing together the larger puzzle. Together, the trio formed an unlikely alliance, determined to uncover the full extent of the threat lurking in the shadows. Their search led them to a remote ranch nestled deep within the Badlands, a place known locally as the Forgotten Hollow. Legend spoke of strange occurrences there, livestock vanishing without a trace, crops wilting overnight, and eerie lights dancing across the horizon at dusk. Few ventured near the hollow anymore, but John and his companions pressed on, driven by necessity. The approach to the ranch was ominous. The land around it seemed barren, devoid of life, as though even nature itself shied away from whatever resided within. As they drew closer, the air grew colder, carrying with it a faint metallic tang that made John's stomach churn. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the ground, twisting and writhing as if alive. Clara gasped suddenly, pointing toward the main house. "Look!" she cried. Perched atop the roof was a figure cloaked in black, its form hunched and grotesque. Its head turned slowly, revealing glowing red eyes that locked onto theirs with predatory intensity. Before anyone could react, the creature leapt, disappearing into the darkness with unnatural speed. "That wasn't human," Sheriff Thompson muttered, his hand instinctively reaching for his revolver. "No," John agreed, his voice low and tense. "And I fear it's only the beginning." Inside the ranch house, they discovered more evidence of the supernatural forces at work. Walls were covered in cryptic symbols, their glow pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. In the basement, an altar similar to the one in the cave stood, surrounded by relics and offerings. Among them was a journal written, in a language none of them recognized, though certain phrases repeated themselves throughout. Asterisk, the veil grows thin, the balance shifts, they come. Asterisk, as they examined the artifacts, a sudden tremor shook the building, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. The ground beneath their feet rumbled ominously, and the glow of the symbols intensified, casting flickering shadows across the walls. From somewhere deep within the earth, a low, guttural growl reverberated through the air, causing each of them to freeze in terror. "It's coming," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "Whatever it is, it's waking up." Before they could retreat, the door slammed shut, sealing them inside. A chilling laugh echoed through the halls, growing louder with each passing second. Shadows danced wildly across the walls, taking on shapes too horrifying to describe. The three companions exchanged desperate glances, knowing they had no choice but stand their ground. From the depths of the house emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen, a towering monstrosity with skin like molten lava and eyes that burned with intelligence both ancient and cruel. Its very presence filled the air with suffocating heat, forcing them to stagger backward. "This ends now," John declared, raising his revolver. Beside him, Sheriff Thompson and Clara armed themselves with makeshift weapons, their determination shining through despite the overwhelming odds. The battle that ensued was fierce and brutal, testing every ounce of courage and resourcefulness they possessed. Bullets bounced harmlessly off the creature's fiery hide, while its claws tore through wood and steel alike. Yet somehow, they managed to hold their ground, using the layout of the house to their advantage and striking whenever an opening presented itself. In the final moments, it was Clara who delivered the decisive blow. Using a shard of obsidian carved with protective runes, she plunged it deep into the creature's chest, releasing a blinding burst of light that incinerated it instantly. The house fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as quickly as it had descended. Exhausted but victorious, the three survivors stumbled outside, blinking in the bright sunlight. Around them, the landscape seemed to breathe easier, as though a great weight had been lifted. Yet none of them doubted that this was only the beginning, that somewhere, hidden in the vast expanse of the Wild West, other dangers lurked, waiting for their chance to strike. And so, John Carter resolved to continue his fight, to stand guard against the unseen forces that threatened the world he loved. For in the untamed frontier, where lawlessness reigned and mystery abounded, heroes were born, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And John Carter would forever be one of them. The sun dipped below the horizon. painting the sky in hues of orange and purple as John Carter, Sheriff Thompson, and Clara Hayes rode away from the smoldering ruins of the forgotten Hollow Ranch. The air was thick with the scent of ash and scorched earth, a grim reminder of the battle they had barely survived. Their horses plodded along at a slow pace, their riders too weary to push them any faster. John's mind raced with thoughts of what they had faced, and what might still be out there. The journal they found in the basement spoke of the veil, a barrier between worlds that was growing thinner with each passing year. If left unchecked, it could tear open completely, unleashing horrors beyond imagination onto the Wild West. But how could three people, no matter how determined, hope to stop something so vast? As night fell, the trio set up camp beside a shallow stream, its waters reflecting the light of the stars above. They ate in silence, the weight of recent events pressing heavily upon them. Clara broke the quiet first, her voice soft but steady. "We can't keep running," she said, meeting John's gaze. "If we do, more people will die. More families will disappear like mine did." Sheriff Thompson nodded in agreement. "Clara's right. We need to find others who believe us, others who've seen or heard things they couldn't explain. Together, maybe we can piece together enough information to stop this before it gets worse." John stared into the fire, watching as sparks spiraled upward into the darkness. He thought about Marie, her shadow moving independently, her haunting words echoing in his mind. Asterisk, "Thank you for believing in me." Asterisk, she had been a guardian spirit, bound by a curse to protect those in need. Was it possible that others like her existed? Other beings caught between worlds, waiting to be discovered? Maybe we're not alone in this fight, John mused aloud. There could be lies out there we don't even know about yet. Their journey took them to towns both familiar and unknown, each stop bringing new stories and fresh leads. In Willow Creek, they met an elderly healer named Abigail, who claimed to have encountered spirits during her youth. She spoke of sacred sites scattered across the land, places where the boundary between worlds was weakest. One such site, she said, lay deep within the redwood forest, a place known only as the Whispering Grove. It's said that trees are older than time itself, Abigail explained, her hands trembling as she handed over a map drawn on brittle parchment. They whisper secrets to those brave, or foolish, enough to listen. Be careful, though. Not all who enter the grove come back unchanged. Armed with a map and renewed purpose, John, Sheriff Thompson, and Clara ventured into the forest. The journey was arduous, the dense foliage forcing them to dismount and lead their horses through narrow paths. Shadows danced eerily among the towering trunks, and the air grew colder with every step. By the time they reached the edge of the Whispering Grove, the moon hung low in the sky, casting silvery light over the ancient trees. The grove was unlike anything they had ever seen. The trees stood impossibly tall, their bark etched with glowing runes that pulsed softly in rhythm with the heartbeat of the earth. Vines draped gracefully from branch to branch, forming natural archways that seemed to beckon them forward. A gentle hum filled the air, resonating deep within their chests. At the center of the grove stood a massive tree, its roots spreading wide like the fingers of a giant. Beneath it lay a stone altar, identical to the ones they had encountered before, but far larger and more intricate. Etched into its surface were symbols that glowed brighter than any they had seen, spelling out warnings in a language none of them understood. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled and the hum intensified, becoming almost deafening. From the shadows emerged figures, not human, but humanoid, their forms translucent and shimmering like heat waves rising off desert sands. They moved silently, their glowing eyes fixed on the intruders. "They're here," Clara whispered, clutching her obsidian dagger tightly. "Guardians of the Grove." Before anyone could react, one of the figures stepped forward, its form coalescing into something resembling a woman. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, and her skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow. She spoke in a voice that resonated like the ringing of a bell, filling their minds rather than their ears. Asterisk, "Why have you come to disturb our sanctuary?" Asterisk, she asked, her tone both curious and accusatory. John stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We seek knowledge," he replied, choosing his words carefully. "Knowledge of the veil and how to strengthen it. Your world and ours are connected, whether we like it or not. If we fail, both will suffer." The figure studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded slowly. Asterisk, you speak the truth. Few mortals understand the importance of the veil. Very well, we shall aid you, but beware. The price of such knowledge is steep. Asterisk, what must we do? Sheriff Thompson asked, his hand resting on his revolver. You must travel to the heart of the earth, the Guardian replied. Asterisk, there lies the source of the veil's weakening. Only by confronting its root cause can you hope to repair the damage already done. Asterisk, the heart of the earth proved to be a perilous destination, located deep within the caverns beneath the Badlands. Guided by the Guardian's cryptic instructions, the trio descended into darkness, their lanterns casting flickering shadows on the jagged walls around them. The deeper they went, the stranger the environment became. Crystals jutted from the rock like shards of glass, glowing faintly with an inner light. Strange creatures scurried through the shadows, their forms distorted and alien. At last, they reached the chamber described by the Guardian, a vast space filled with pools of molten gold that reflected the dim light of their lanterns. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, atop which rested a sphere pulsing with energy. It throbbed erratically, its glow waxing and waning like a dying star. This is it, John murmured, approaching cautiously. The source of the veil's weakening. As he reached out to touch the sphere, a voice boomed to the chamber, causing the ground to shake violently. Asterisk, foolish mortals. You dare interfere with forces beyond your comprehension. Asterisk. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything they'd faced before, a being composed entirely of shifting light and shadow, its form constantly changing. Its presence filled the air with unbearable pressure, making it difficult to breathe. You've caused enough suffering. John shouted, raising his revolver despite, knowing it would do little good. This ends now. The battle that followed was unlike anything they had experienced. Bullets ricocheted harmlessly off the creature's shifting form, while its attack sent shockwaves rippling through the chamber. Desperation drove them to use everything at their disposal, obsidian daggers, protective runes carved into floor, and even the elements themselves. Water from the pools combined with fire from the molten gold created steam that momentarily blinded the creature, giving them precious seconds to regroup. In the end, it was Clara who delivered the final blow. Using a shard of crystal charged with energy from the sphere, she struck the creature directly in its core, releasing a blinding explosion of light that consumed it entirely. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as quickly as it had descended. Exhausted but victorious, the three survivors collapsed against the wall, catching their breath. The sphere on the pedestal now pulsed steadily, its glow indicating that the veil had been strengthened, at least for the time being. As they made their way back to the surface, the dawn breaking over the horizon bathed the land in golden light. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but John Carter knew one thing for certain. He would never stop fighting. For in the untamed frontier of the Wild West, where lawlessness reigned and mystery abounded, heroes were born, not out of choice, but out of necessity. And John Carter would forever be one of them.